The cargo freighter Meridian's Hope descended through Neptune Station's docking bay with the grinding reluctance of outdated hydraulics. David watched from Bay 7's observation window, his maintenance tablet forgotten in his calloused hands. He'd worked the docks for 12 years, ever since the accident that had left him with a reconstructed spine and a face full of surgical scars, and he'd learned to read ships like other men read faces. This one carried disappointment. The Catharii trade vessel hung in its docking cradle like a dying star, its bioluminescent hull panels flickering erratically. David knew what that meant. The interspecies bonding program had been controversial from the start, humans seeking alien spouses, aliens seeking human ones, all in the name of diplomatic unity and genetic diversity. Most unions were arranged through careful pheromone matching and psychological compatibility scans. But sometimes the matches failed. David moved toward the airlock as the ship's doors hissed open. Protocol required a dock supervisor to verify rejected cargo, and yes, the IBP classified unbonded arrivals as exactly that. Cargo. The thought made his stomach turn, but he'd stopped questioning the bureaucracy years ago. She emerged into the stark fluorescent lighting like a creature from Earth's ancient oceans. Elsa, the name was printed on her identification bracelet in both standard English and Catharii glyphs, stood approximately 6 feet tall, her skin an iridescent pattern of silver and deep purple that shifted with each breath. Her eyes were large and dark, with 3 distinct pupils that contracted independently as they adjusted to the station's artificial light. Delicate gill-like structures along her neck fluttered softly, and her hair, if it could be called that, consisted of thin, translucent filaments that moved with an otherworldly grace. She was beautiful in a way that defied human aesthetics, and she was alone. Rejected, the ship's captain, a grizzled woman named Tors, said without ceremony. She handed David the datapad. Her intended took one look at the neural scan results and backed out, said her cognitive patterns were too alien for integration. Tors spat the words like poison. Coward couldn't handle the fact that she thinks in quantum probabilities instead of linear time. David scrolled through the information. Elsa's profile was extensive. University education in theoretical physics on Cathar Prime, fluent in 7 languages including Standard English, interests in ancient human literature and terraforming ecology. She traveled 4.2 light-years for this match, spent 3 years in cryosleep, all for a man who'd rejected her within an hour of meeting. He looked up. Elsa was staring at him with those impossible eyes, and he realized she was reading the datapad from across the room, upside down and backwards, processing the information faster than his own brain could formulate a response. "What happens to her now?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. Tors shrugged. "Back to Cathar Prime on the next quarterly transport. 6 months waiting here, then another 3 years in cryo. If she's lucky, they'll match her again. If not," she didn't finish. They both knew the statistics. Rejected applicants rarely received second chances. The program's funding was too limited, the political opposition too fierce. Elsa's gill structures fluttered more rapidly. David had learned enough xenobiology to recognize distress. On Cathar Prime, a rejected bonding was considered a fundamental failure, not just romantic, but existential. She would return home marked, diminished. Her probability matrices collapsed into a singular narrative of failure. The words left David's mouth before his conscious mind could veto them. "I'll marry her." Tors blinked. "What?" The IBP regulations allow for spontaneous bonding in cases of rejection, provided both parties consent and submit to immediate compatibility screening. David had read the manual, all 16,000 pages, during the long, lonely nights when sleep wouldn't come and the pain medication made him restless. "I'm eligible. Single, stable employment, cleared psychological evaluation from last year." Elsa's 3 pupils fixed on him with sudden intensity. Her translucent hair filaments stood rigid, and David felt something, not quite physical, not quite mental, brush against his consciousness. It was like standing at the edge of a vast ocean and feeling the pull of the tide. She was scanning him, reading his quantum signature, his probability cloud, the infinite versions of himself that existed in superposition until observed and collapsed into this single moment. Why? Her voice was like crystal chimes underwater, the translator chip in her throat rendering K-Tharii phonemes into accented English. You know nothing of me. David looked down at his scarred hands, at the maintenance uniform that marked him as one of the station's invisible workers, at the reflection of his own damaged face in the datapad's dark screen. I know you're not cargo, he said quietly. I know you traveled further than I can imagine for a chance at connection. I know what it's like to be rejected because you don't fit someone's expectations. He met her eyes, all 6 pupils, and I know that everyone deserves to be chosen. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility. Elsa's expression was unreadable by human standards, but her gill structures had calmed, moving in slow, rhythmic patterns. You understand that K-Tharii bonding is not merely legal contract. Our neural patterns will begin synchronization. You will perceive time as I do, non-linearly, all possibilities simultaneously present. It is disorienting for humans. I've been disoriented before. David smiled, the scar tissue pulling at the corner of his mouth. I survived a plasma conduit explosion. I think I can handle quantum probability. Something happened to Elsa's face then, a subtle shift in the bioluminescence beneath her skin, a softening of the patterns around her eyes. If he didn't know better, David would have called it a smile. Then I consent, she said, and extended her hand. Her fingers were long and elegant, with an extra joint that allowed them to curve in impossible directions. David took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished stone, and the moment they touched he felt it, a rush of temporal vertigo as his linear consciousness brushed against her quantum awareness. For one dizzying instant, he saw all the possible futures branching out before them, some ending in disaster, others in quiet contentment, a few in something that might be called love. Tors was already pulling out her authorization pad, muttering about paperwork and spontaneous bonding protocols. But David barely heard her. He was too busy experiencing the present moment, this singular, collapsed probability where a lonely dockworker and a rejected alien bride chose each other from all the infinite alternatives. Welcome to Neptune Station, David said softly. Welcome home. Elsa's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with something that might have been joy. Home, she repeated, testing the word. Yes, a good probability. In the observation window, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small acts of courage and connection that defined sentient life. But here, in Bay 7 of Neptune Station, 2 beings who'd been deemed insufficient by others found themselves perfectly matched in their imperfection. The ceremony would be simple, a formality conducted by Tors with her captain's authority. But the choice had already been made, the probability wave collapsed, the future suddenly, impossibly bright with potential. David had spent 12 years in the shadows of the docks, invisible and alone. Today, finally, he was seen. And in Elsa's quantum gaze, he glimpsed all the versions of himself he might yet become.